Chapter 10 The Old Switcheroo. As I sat on stage in the school cafeteria auditorium the next morning, in my wear to your cousin's wedding suit, my hands were sweating so much that the copy of my speech was all damp and soggy. Lizzie was next to me whispering, "Calm down," every 5 seconds, even though nobody in history has ever calmed down because someone told them to. We were on one side of the podium, and James sat with Craig on the other. The entire student body was in front of us, and Dodger had just appeared in back of the audience, holding a big dry erase board and a marker. But that wasn't what had me so worked up. I was tormented by the thought of using magic to cheat on the speech. Plus, I wasn't so sure that sounding like Roger would be an improvement. The great Lasorda was a pretty shifty guy. Maybe he wanted me to lose the election. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more sure I became that this whole magic dust trick would backfire. And besides, now that my dad had gone over my speech with me, I thought it was pretty darn good. Just as Miss Starsky gestured for me and James to approach the podium, I had an idea. I would leave things up to James. Miss Starsky had explained to me that he would choose who got to go first in this round of speeches, and I would decide the order in our second round. So when she made us shake hands, I whispered, "Hey James, do you think maybe I could go first? I mean, since you have the advantage and everything, being so well loved by everybody and all, could you please just consider it?" Lizzie looked over at me, and I could read her lips saying, "What are you doing?" I winked at her. James pushed my hand away in disgust and said, "Help you? Why would I help a dork like you?" Then he turned to Miss Starsky and put on a phony sweet kid voice as he told her, "Ma'am, I think I'd like to go first today, all right?" Lizzie's face suddenly lit up. I could tell she understood what had just happened, but Dodger wasn't going to be happy. Miss Starsky nodded at James, wished us both luck, and stepped up to the podium. She leaned toward the microphone that was mounted on it, quieted everybody down, and gave James a big introduction. Way off in the distance, Dodger scribbled on the sign, "You were supposed to go first." A lot of the kids cheered when Miss Starsky said James' name, but a few sat with their arms crossed, looking unhappy. Maybe James didn't have quite as many friends as he thought. James walked calmly to the platform, put his speech on the podium, and began. I could have sworn I saw some flashing sparkles in the air around his head as he spoke the first words, but maybe that was just my imagination. However, the disaster that followed was 100% real. Here, for the sake of historical accuracy, is a complete transcription of James Beek's first presidential campaign speech. "Dear classmates, fellow students, comrades, peers, contemporaries, I am here to tell you the reasons, the whys, the wherefores, the rationale to explain why I am the best, the greatest, the most deserving candidate in this election." James paused at this point, squinted at his speech, picked up the pages, shook them before continuing. Meanwhile, Dodger wrote, "Oh no, he's going to win. You know I have always served in the student government of this school, this educational institution, this center of learning, to the best of my ability, and I think I have always done a good, great, exemplary, swell, fabulous, funky, fresh, super bad, righteous job." James paused again, shaking his head as though he had water in his ear. Meanwhile, kids in the audience were starting to murmur, and a few giggles were breaking out around the room. Dodger erased frantically, then wrote, "See? We're dead. So you have to ask yourself, wonder, ponder the issue. Decide whether you would rather have the most experienced man in office or throw away, toss, waste your vote on," James pointed at me, "this geek, this nerd, this dork, this loser, this pathetic, sniveling, chinless weakling." Dodger jumped up and down and pointed to his newest message. "No chin, dude." Meanwhile, Miss Starsky got up at this point and approached James. She did not look pleased. Miss Starsky whispered something in James' ears, and his whole face got pale. Wow, this was a powerful spell. It even made you clear your throat 4 different ways. Dodger stopped writing, looked puzzled for a moment, then started to laugh. "Sorry, I just had something stuck in my throat. A bit of gooey phlegm, a wad of partially thickened mucus, a hocker, a loogie, Students were openly turning away from James in disgust now. There were definitely pockets of laughter around the room. Miss Starsky went up to James again with what must have been the second warning. Dodger wrote, "Hey, this might be okay." Okay then, back to my speech, my monologue, my oration. I was saying that I should be president, leader, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, big kahuna, head honcho, silverback male of the school because of my experience. Also, I would like to thank Miss Starsky, this lady here, this massively boring woman to my left. She of the rancid coffee breath and "Enough!" Miss Starsky roared, ripping the cord out of the microphone. Then in front of the whole school she screamed and yelled at James until he stormed off the stage. As he passed me, he hissed, "I don't know how you did this, but you are dead, deceased, extinct, 6 feet under, pushing up daisies. This isn't over." Boy, even if they get to go first, some people are just never satisfied. After James stalked off, Miss Darcy plugged the microphone back in and introduced me. As I stood to approach the microphone, Lizzie whispered, "Good luck." Dodger grabbed his marker again and wrote, "Skate or walk." I gave it my best shot. At the podium, I looked out over the audience and tried to look serious and important. Dodger wrote, "Smile." So I did. Then he wrote, "Not too much." I worked on smiling without smiling too much, took a deep breath, and gave my improved, polished speech. I don't know how much of it anyone actually heard, though, because the whole room was pretty much in an uproar. But at least I didn't make a fool out of myself, and if James had looked like a massive idiot, well, it had been kind of his choice. I mean, I almost could have felt a tiny bit sorry for him, but it wasn't like I had told him to go first or anything. When we walked out of the auditorium, the last thing I saw was Dodger's hands reaching up over the crowd in a double B for victory sign. For the rest of the day, people were talking about James's speech all over the school. Miss Starsky was flustered and grumpy. Every time our class settled down, we could hear other teachers yelling at their classes to be quiet, and I kept hearing whispers and murmurs in the halls: loogie, coffee breath, silverback male, hawk, gargle. I'm happy to say I didn't run into James or Craig all day, but then on the way out to the bus lines, Lizzie and I saw them huddled together under the slides at the playground. "Willie, come on," Lizzie said, pulling on my arm. "We have to go listen to what they're saying." I was horrified. "What do you mean? We can't just walk over there. Beaks will kill me, and it's not nice to sneak up and eavesdrop." Lizzie looked a little embarrassed. She leaned against the school wall, pulled a dropper out of her coat, and used it to drip 3 drops of brown, smelly liquid on the sole of each of their shoes. "I never got to finish telling you this the other day," she said, "but Dodger made me promise that the next time I saw Craig and James talking, I should use this. It's called Tincture of Distraction, and while you're wearing it, nobody can concentrate on you unless they're in physical contact with you. It only works once on a pair of shoes, but it will let us sneak up on them without being noticed. And why do we want to do that? Dodger told me that Craig needs help, and we're the only ones who can give it. The Great Lasorda told him so. But we don't trust the Great Lasorda. Plus, if he wants to help Craig so badly, why doesn't he just give the kid 3 wishes himself?" "He can't," Lizzie said. "Craig is Irish." "So what? I'm Irish too," I replied. "You're only half Irish." Dodger said that according to the Intermagical Cooperation Accords of 1817, only fully licensed leprechauns may help full-blooded Irish children with domestic problems. The Great Lasorda could get fined 17 doubloons, a pint of pixie dust, and an ounce of myrrh if he interferes directly with Craig's family trouble. Myrrh? What the heck is myrrh? Lizzie gave me a pained look as she bent down and grabbed my right sneaker. "Doesn't matter, Willie. Craig needs our help, and I promised." Sometimes it stinks being the good guys. Lizzie started anointing my sneakers with this stinky stuff. The first one went fine, but she slipped a bit on the second one. "Oops," she said. "Oh well. 3 drops, 5 drops, what's the difference?" I think maybe she's been hanging out with Dodger too much lately, if you want to know the truth. Anyway, then we tiptoed around the back of the playground and up to the tube slide. From in there, we could hear every word Craig and James said, amplified by the plastic walls around us. "James, I still don't understand what happened with the speech today." "Craig, I already told you. I couldn't help myself. It was like I was a puppet or something. Somebody was making me say that stuff." Craig didn't sound convinced. "You mean like they changed the words on your paper?" "No, I mean they were controlling my brain. I wanted to read my speech the way it was written, but I just couldn't do it." "Oh," Craig said, "so all we have to do is go to Miss Starsky, tell her that somebody was controlling your brain, and everything will be fine." We heard a thwack, and Craig said, "Ow, what did you do that for? You idiot. Don't you know anything about politics?" No, I don't. I'm only running for vice president because you told me to. You said I didn't need to know anything, and that all I had to do was stand near you and look scary." "Well, the first rule is that you never apologize for the truth. You make up a half-truth, deliver a half apology, and then find a way to blame your opponent for the whole issue. It's called the weasel defense." "Huh?" "Listen, let's say I had gas, okay?" Okay, you had gas." "Right, so I totally blasted one off, like right in the middle of class, and then Willie Ryan made a face. Using the weasel defense, I'd say, 'Wow, did you hear that? Somebody in this room has an innocent little tooting problem.' I'm sorry for bringing this up, but my opponent doesn't seem to have any respect for our classmates who face physical challenges. Then, whatever Ryan says, he looks like the bad guy." Craig still had that doubting tone as he said, "And this works? Are you kidding me? Have you ever listened to an election campaign? How many times did George W. Bush get elected? It's foolproof." We heard a thud and then some muffled, colorful language from Craig. "What's the matter, Craig? You just dropped your school bag. It's not like it's a big deal or anything. Craig blurted, "Look, James, there are two cell phones in my bag. Not one, two. Which means my little brother forgot to take his phone with him to his dad's house, and then I accidentally threw it in my bag. So, so now when he wakes up in the middle of the night, he won't be able to call me." "Okay, so you'll go home and tell your mom to drive you over there." "I can't. She'll be at work, and there's no way my stepdad will drive me there. It's like 20 minutes each way. Plus, he hates seeing my other stepdad. Anyway, I can't tell them about my brother's night terrors because then our mom won't let him go see his dad at all." "Wow, sounds major." "It is major, you jerk. Now my brother's going to be scared and alone with nobody to. I could tell Craig really felt horrible. He might have been the toughest kid in fifth grade, twice, but he sure did have a soft spot for his brother. I started to wonder whether I would have been as worried if it had been Amy alone and scared in the dark. My thoughts were interrupted by a horrible burning sensation in my left big toe. It was hard to reach my foot lying there in the tunnel, with Lizzie's feet in my face. But I managed to rip off my shoe, and in the dim reddish light coming through the plastic, I could see the drops had eaten right through my sneaker and into my toe. I tried to check out the damage, but it was too hard to focus my attention on the toe. I realized that the magic was spreading to my foot. Another wave of pain shot through me, and I winced. This made Lizzie slip. Her left knee whacked into my bruised cheekbone, and I dropped the sneaker. It clattered all the way down the slide, stopping with a resounding thump at the last turn. James said, "Wait, what's that? Remember you thought you saw something here the other night, and then today something made me give that speech? I bet this place is haunted. I'm getting out of here." "Stop, James. What about my little brother? You're the smart one. You have to help me figure out what to do." At that moment, Lizzie shifted her weight in an attempt to get her knee out of my aching eye. We slipped about 2 feet down the slide with a shuffling, squeaky sound. James heard it and said, "Sorry, dude, but when it comes to ghosts, it's every man for himself." Later, James' footsteps echoed as he charged away from the playground. Lizzie and I were huddled together inside the slide, trying our hardest to disappear, when all of a sudden a huge, steely hand closed around my bare foot, and Craig yanked me out of the bottom of the slide.